Friends, we can all see that many white bloggers have millions of followers. Please support me too, because my followers are still few. Black bloggers also deserve to be famous. My friends, let's unite and lift each other up. Please press subscribe button and like. The morning mist hung low over Arlington National Cemetery, shrouding the rows of white headstones in a somber veil. It was October 14th, a day that would forever alter the course of American history. General Elise Monroe stood at the entrance of Section 60, her dress blues immaculate despite the 3-hour drive from Fort Bragg. At 52, she embodied the strength and resilience of a woman who had dedicated 3 decades to her country. Today, she clutched a simple wooden urn containing the ashes of Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, a soldier who had served under her command and had recently lost his life in Afghanistan. As she approached the gravesite, her aide, Captain James Rodriguez, whispered, "The family is gathering. We should proceed." Monroe nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of loss. Thompson had been a natural leader, a soldier who had inspired those around him. She recalled his laughter, the way he had lightened the mood during their darkest days in combat. But as they neared the security checkpoint, Monroe noticed an Arlington Police Department cruiser parked at an odd angle, partially blocking the entrance. Officer Robert Hasker leaned against the vehicle, scrolling through his phone, seemingly indifferent to the solemnity of the occasion. At 41, Hasker had been on the force for 12 years, but today, he was about to become the focal point of a confrontation that would reverberate across the nation. "Ma'am, this area is restricted," Hasker called out, stepping in front of Monroe as she approached. His hand rested casually on his service weapon, a gesture that sent a chill down her spine. "I need to see your ID." Monroe remained calm, producing her military identification. "I'm General Elise Monroe. I'm here for Staff Sergeant Thompson's burial ceremony." Hasker's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized her uniform. "We get a lot of people trying to crash these ceremonies. Stolen valor is a serious crime." His tone dripped with skepticism. "Officer, my ID is valid federal identification. I'm the keynote speaker at the ceremony, and the family is waiting," Monroe replied, her voice steady. "You can verify my credentials with your supervisor." Hasker pocketed her ID instead of returning it. "I'm going to need you to wait here while I verify this." Monroe felt the tension in the air thicken as a small crowd began to gather behind her. Soldiers in dress uniforms exchanged glances of disbelief. Rodriguez stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Officer, General Monroe is—" "I wasn't talking to you." Hasker snapped, his eyes fixed on Monroe. "You got any other identification? Driver's license? Something real?" The crowd fell silent. Phones were pulled out, and the atmosphere shifted from somber to electric. Monroe could feel the weight of their stares, the disbelief that a decorated general was being treated this way on sacred ground. "Officer Hasker," she said, her voice carrying the authority of her years of service. "What exactly about me doesn't sit right? Is it the uniform, the rank, or is it something else?" "Don't try to make this about something it's not," Hasker shot back, his voice rising. "I'm doing my job. Your job is to provide security for these ceremonies, not to harass attendees," Monroe replied, her tone unwavering. "I've shown you valid federal identification. You have no reasonable suspicion of any crime. Return my ID and let me proceed." Hasker's hand tightened on his weapon, and the crowd murmured. "You're being deliberately confrontational. That's suspicious behavior." "I'm being direct," Monroe corrected. "There's a difference. Now, I'm asking you once more, return my identification and allow me to proceed to Staff Sergeant Thompson's funeral." The tension escalated as cemetery staff rushed over, and John Martinez, the cemetery administrator, recognized Monroe immediately. "Officer, that's General Monroe. She's on our list for today's ceremony." "I said stay out of it," Hasker barked, his voice cracking like a whip. He was losing control, and Monroe could see it in his body language. "Officer Hasker," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you are pointing a weapon at an unarmed United States military officer on federal property. I need you to think very carefully about what happens next." The crowd gasped collectively as Hasker's hand shook, sweat beading on his forehead. "You're resisting." You're failing to comply. I'm standing still with my hands visible, Monroe stated clearly. I am not resisting. I am not threatening you. I am holding the remains of a fallen soldier, and I'm asking you to lower your weapon. Just then, Sarah Thompson, Marcus's widow, arrived at the scene, her 2 young daughters clinging to her black dress. "Oh my God! What's happening, General Monroe?" she cried. Her voice filled with confusion and fear. Monroe's heart sank as she saw the terror in the children's eyes. "Everyone's recording this," someone in the crowd shouted. "It's already going viral." In that moment, Monroe realized the gravity of the situation. She was not just fighting for her dignity. She was fighting for the memory of a fallen soldier and the future of his family. "Officer Hasker," she said, her voice steady. "You have a choice. You can lower your weapon, return my ID, and we can all proceed with laying a hero to rest. Or you can continue down this path. But understand that you're not just pointing that gun at me. You're pointing it at everyone who has ever worn this uniform." The 2 stood frozen, a tableau of everything wrong and everything strong about America. Hasker's radio crackled to life. Dispatch calling for a status update. Slowly, reluctantly, he began to lower his weapon, though his finger remained indexed along the trigger guard. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice thick with rage and humiliation. "Officer, you people have been dying for this country since before it was a country," Monroe replied, her composure finally cracking just enough to let an edge of steel through. "You people have earned every star, every stripe, every folded flag with blood and sacrifice. And right now, you people are trying to bury a hero while you stand here gunned, desecrating everything that flag represents." As the crowd began to disperse, Monroe turned to Sarah Thompson, who was now sobbing. "I'm so sorry," Monroe whispered, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "This isn't what Marcus deserved." But Sarah looked up, her eyes filled with determination. "You stood your ground just like you would have." The funeral proceeded, but it was forever changed. Monroe delivered her eulogy with the same composure she had shown at gunpoint. But everyone present knew they had witnessed something beyond a simple burial. They had seen a collision of 2 Americas, one that served with honor despite the cost, and one that confused power with purpose. As the ceremony concluded, Monroe stood at Thompson's grave, the weight of the day pressing down on her. She had kept her promise to Thompson to see him home, to honor his service, but the fact that she had to do it at gunpoint would haunt her long after the headlines faded, and the weeks that followed. The incident sparked a national conversation about respect, service, and the true meaning of valor. Monroe became a symbol of dignity in the face of degradation, and her story resonated across the country. 5 years later, as she stood in the Rose Garden of the White House, about to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Monroe reflected on the journey that had begun that fateful day at Arlington. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but she had not stepped back. In standing her ground, she had helped America take a step forward as she accepted the medal. She thought of Marcus Thompson, his family, and all those who had stood with her. The fight for justice and dignity would continue, but she knew that together they could move mountains. But just as she was about to step away from the podium, a commotion erupted at the back of the crowd. A figure pushed through the throng, shouting, "General Monroe! General Monroe!" The crowd parted, revealing a young man, his face flushed with urgency. "Wait!" he called out, breathless. "I have to speak to you. It's about Officer Hasker." Monroe's heart raced. She had thought the chapter on Hasker was closed, but the look in the young man's eyes told her otherwise. The crowd hushed, all eyes now on the unexpected interruption. "Please, just a moment," he pleaded, stepping closer. "You need to know what he's been doing since he was arrested. It's not over yet. There's something you need to hear." Monroe exchanged glances with her aides, uncertainty creeping in. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, and she could feel the tension building as the crowd awaited her response. "All right," she said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "What do you know?" The young man took a deep breath, his expression shifting from desperation to determination. "It's about the threats he's been making from inside. He's not just sitting quietly in his cell. He's planning something, and it involves more than just him. You need to understand." Before he could finish, a loud crash echoed from the back of the crowd, followed by shouts and chaos. Monroe's instincts kicked in and she turned to see a group of men pushing to barriers, their faces obscured by masks. "Get down!" someone yelled, and the crowd erupted into panic. Monroe's heart raced as she realized the situation was spiraling out of control. "Stay close," she shouted to her aides, her military training taking over as she assessed the threat. The young man's warning echoed in her mind, and she knew that this was far from over. As the chaos unfolded, Monroe felt a surge of determination. She had faced down threats before, and she would not back down now. The fight for justice, for dignity, and for the memory of those who had served was just beginning. With the crowd scattering in all directions, Monroe stood her ground, ready to confront whatever came next. The stakes had never been higher, and she was prepared to face them head-on. But just as she took a step forward, the scene froze, the tension palpable, leaving the outcome hanging in the balance. What would happen next? Would she be able to protect those around her? Would the truth about Hasker come to light? The answers lay just beyond the chaos, waiting to unfold. Do you want to know the fate of the heroes? Please post part 2. Subscribe to the channel and continue watching. Your opinion and support are important to me. Leave it in the comments. Thank you.